Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming. I appreciate it. My name is Alex Bianchi. Alex is fine, even though some of the announcements said Alexander. And I'm just going to be talking about a little bit about my journey to through software engineering internships, and then I'm going to talk a good chunk about motivation for being in computer science and a bunch of philosophical stuff that none of you signed up for. And then I'm going to talk about all of the hacks and resume things and projects and all the stuff that you're actually here for. So first, who am I? I'm a CS major here. This is my last semester. I'm 20 years old, so I'm not crazy older than anybody. And I started at Rutgers last fall. This last summer, I did a software engineering internship at Google working on Android. And then the summer before that, I did full stack web development at a local tech company. So I do have a YouTube channel. The QR code will be at the end. Please subscribe. Almost at 1,000 subscribers, so that's fun. I am in the middle of kind of revamping the YouTube channel right now, and I haven't posted in a bit, but I will get back to that. And then in terms of things that this talk kind of is not, I'm not talking about being a computer science student at Rutgers, which is kind of a very distinct thing from getting a software engineering internship, because software engineering and computer science are fairly different things. I'm not talking about whether or not FANG is worth it or any companies like that. I'm not really going to talk about the story of my time at Google or at those internships, so though feel free to ask me questions if you're interested. This definitely is not about grad school, because if you're interested in grad school, then all of the advice for what you should do in undergrad is totally different. And it's definitely not about cutting corners, and it's not the only way to go about getting an internship. So there are plenty of people that disagree with some of the things I say. If you disagree, feel free. This is just kind of my take on everything. And I do think it's important to give a brief history of my kind of education, and mostly for two reasons. They're kind of contradictory. First off, you really shouldn't compare yourself to others. So if I'm talking about all these things I've done, and I'm 20 and I'm the age of a junior, and you haven't done those things, it can be really easy to compare yourself, and I don't want anybody to do that. But also, as using me as an example, I didn't write any code in high school. I wasn't a whiz kid growing up with CS. So both don't compare yourself to me, because you should only compare yourself to yourself. And also, I am a good example of somebody who didn't write any code in high school and kind of going from 0 lines of code to doing things in software engineering. In terms of a timeline, like I said, when I graduated high school, I didn't have any programming experience, but I did have an associate's degree through a program at my high school. I had 60 college credits, and that was a pretty big advantage. I then spent 1 semester as a business student at Seton Hall, which I was not a fan of whatsoever. Wasn't exactly happy there. And I dropped out that spring to basically take 6 months and just learn how to code, grind leak code, get good at studying interviews, and put some projects on my resume. And then, so that's the spring. And that first summer, after that spring semester that I took off, I got my first internship at a local tech company. And then I started at Rutgers taking CS 111 last fall. So at that point, I'd already done a decent amount of programming on my own time. And I was taking 111 and Intro to Computer Graphics and a lot of math classes at Rutgers. In the fall, I got an offer from Amazon, and then I chose not to go down that path, because in January, I got an offer from Google while I was taking data structures to be an intern there. And then this last summer, I was at Google. I worked remote, although I did fly out to California one day, and that was all a lot of fun. So that's a little bit about me. And then just things that I didn't cover. I got asked recently, was the grind worth it? And it's not my whole life is software engineering. Clearly, I think about these things a lot, but I do roll jiu-jitsu, and I have a social life and things like that. I did take a lot of credits every semester to graduate or to do the whole curriculum in 3 semesters. So that is true that I did definitely get burnt out taking that many credits. And then huge thing that I was super lucky for was that spring semester that I took off. I was just living at my mom's house programming the whole time. I didn't have to work. I had high school savings. I was very lucky and privileged in a lot of ways to have all of that support under me. So I feel it's important to note where we're lucky and where we have some privilege, so that people have a good context for who they're thinking about. But I don't know, maybe I'm just insecure. And now about kind of the philosophical by the way, if I'm moving too fast or if you have questions, like interrupt me, raise your hands, wave at me to slow down, like anything. Yeah.
Are you going to post these slides anywhere?
Yeah, I can. They're not entirely designed to go without me speaking, but I can definitely post them. And I'm also recording, so the whole video is going to be posted on my YouTube channel. So common reasons why people might be in computer science. You have a passion for programming, which is great. Not that you need a passion for programming to be here. You like to build things, which is also great. You want to apply it to another field, or you're interested in another STEM field, but CS kind of like struck a practical balance of like money and some other things. And in that case, slight side tangent, Python jobs are like perfect for you, because if you're really into bio or you're really into another field, there aren't a lot of Python jobs that are just for like people that know Python well, but there are a ton of Python jobs for people who like know bio and want to automate some things in lab testing and do some bioinformatics. Like that's really who Python jobs are meant for. So anyone on the internet who's peddling you like learn Python in 6 months and get a job, probably not, because a lot of the Python jobs actually target people who have tangential job experience in other STEM fields. Another common reason is that it's the easiest major your parents would approve of. I've heard that mentioned a couple of times. Some people regard it as easier than the engineering majors, which I've talked to some engineering majors, and it seems pretty brutal in that school. So I might agree, although I'm not an engineering major, so I can't tell. And then one thing that I am missing is money. And money is a huge motivator for a ton of people to be in CS. And that's just like an objective fact that we really shouldn't ignore. And I really don't think that it's good. Like you see a lot of kids who are like super passionate about CS talking down about kids who are just here for the money, and vice versa. And like, I don't think that's good. It's okay if you're here for the money. We all come from plenty of different backgrounds. There's plenty of reasons to want money. Maybe you shouldn't glorify money like you're just trying to do it so you can drive around a cool car. But if you want stability, or you want to start your own business, or you want to work less hours in the given week, and like making more money allows you to work less, like tons of good reasons to be here that involve money. Although to gauge your expectations, if you're strictly here for the money, I don't know that it's a good enough motivator to get you to like the 90th plus percentile of income, which if you're here for the money, you're thinking about the income. It is probably good enough to get you to like a mid-level software engineering job though, which is still going to pay more than most jobs and most other careers, at least fresh out of college. So not demonizing being here for the money. I do think you should gauge your expectations and know why you want the money, but it is important to know. And I'm going to talk a little bit about why I don't know that it matters why we are here. The path to becoming a software engineering intern and a software engineer should still look roughly the same. In terms of why I'm here, I am very interested in CS and SWE. I'm lucky in that sense that I have a passion for something that also fulfills a lot of other things. I'm really big into entrepreneurship. I grew up reading like the biographies of Steve Jobs and Bill Gates. So when I was in Silicon Valley this last summer and I was like looking around at all these things I had read about, that was a really cool experience. I do like math a lot, and I wanted to find a major and a career that, even if I'm not like hardcore proving things all the time as a software engineer, it's definitely in the culture. It's definitely around, and I appreciate that. And then, of course, money. I made a joke with my mom that if I didn't get a job offer I liked, I was just going to go like travel the world for a year because I'll just go figure it out and volunteer or do Teach for America. Like there's plenty of things to do. So that's why I'm here. And in terms of why, like where you come from and why you're here matters. The formula for getting an internship, it's completely proven. You can look it up on YouTube. I'm about to tell it to you. But actually going through and practicing for interviews and getting a good resume and doing projects, that can be a lot of a grind. And every time you sit down like at your desk to do it, if you don't know why you're sitting down, it can be hard to motivate yourself. And you might have all these goals, but without your motivation in mind, it might be hard to consistently day in and day out. Like this talk or watching a good YouTube video might give you motivation for a weekend, but you're going to have to be doing this for like all 4 years of your CS education. That's a long time, so you want to make sure you're motivated. I do think it's useful to set kind of like 6-month, 1, 5, 10-year goals, having not just like why you're here right now, but what do you kind of expect for the future. And in the end of the day, like long-term success in software engineering, whether you just want to get an entry-level job and then coast, or you want to climb the ladder, or you want to eventually make a startup, it really is all about your frame of mind. And some frame of minds that I think are incorrect, which I I literally heard in my systems class the other day someone complaining about how like C wasn't asked at interviews, and I was kind of thinking to myself, this class is an elective. If you don't want to take it, then don't. Take a class more relevant to interviews. So like, why should I care about learning this? It won't be on the job. I got into CS because I like math and machine learning. Why do I need to learn C? Why do I need to learn math? I just want to build programs. CS degrees are worthless because software engineering is so different. Or you just need like a given set of keywords on a resume in order to get the software engineering job. Like, there's a lot of talk about that, like online or on YouTube, or peddled to you by people trying to sell you get-rich-quick courses. And I really don't think that mentality is kind of productive for the long term. So that's kind of like the hacking, quote-unquote, software engineering mentality. And reasons why it doesn't pan out, like recently, the economy, brutal. If you're on your team and you're next to somebody who's like really gotten good at software engineering, and you come from the kind of, you just like hacked your way into the job, who's going to get laid off first? Or if you decide that suddenly you want a promotion a few years down the line, but you don't have like a real foundation built up from your undergrad, I don't know that that necessarily sets you up for success in your next endeavor, even if you do hack your way to whatever your first goal is. So overall, it's a pretty short-term attitude. And when you like sit down and you think, I want to get a software engineering internship, and you're just trying to hack your way there, actually figuring out what to do in that moment can be a little difficult, because it's like, get a project on your resume. Like, okay, what project? Like, I don't have any project ideas. I didn't have any project ideas for a long time. Like, project ideas are actually hard, even though it's such a simple problem. But so many people struggle with project ideas, and so did I. And I think it is partly a symptom of this mentality. Not saying that if you struggle for project ideas, you have this mentality, because I'm pretty sure we all do that. But in terms of an alternative, I'm not just ragging on this mentality. What I really want to do here is show that, like, no matter why you're here, no matter what your motivation is, in the end of the day, the best, the most long-term kind of attitude that you can take to becoming a software engineer is to make yourself a software engineer, to study software engineering for the sake of being a better software engineer. We should all be here to be well-rounded, skilled computer scientists / software engineers. So there's a book, which I'd been thinking about these things for so long, and it's like when you have an idea and then you Google it and somebody else already did it 10 times better. That is what Cal Newport did with his book that I am most of the way through, called So Good They Can't Ignore You. And in that book, he talks about the career craftsman. And it's kind of funny for me to make fun of get-rich-quick schemes and then go peddle you guys a book as if it's another get-rich-quick scheme. So I'm very wary of those on the internet. But the overall idea is that long-term, you will net more trying to be the best software engineer you can be. And then in the process, you get projects on your resume. You get good at interviewing, rather than trying to get good at interviewing and get projects on your resume. And then kind of in the process, you become a good software engineer because you have to pump out projects. So I think that shift in frame of mind is really good. And I promise I don't drag on too much with the philosophical crap. I will get to how to set up your resume and everything. But first, going through his core ideas, he thinks that passions are made and not found, and I definitely agree with that. And I think that's a really powerful idea, because it says you're not at the genetic whims of some passion that you're just yet to find, and you just got to go out there and find it. Instead, good careers are crafted systematically, and you craft careers by like mastering something valuable that can provide value to other people, to companies, and in the world. And as you master something through that kind of like hard focused work, you can then leverage that mastery to accomplish any goal. So that's kind of no matter what motivation you come from, you try and become a better software engineer. And through that, you can accomplish whatever your goal is. For most of us, it's getting that first internship, but long term, it can be any of the motivations that I kind of talked about before. And then as you develop those skills, as you become a better software engineer, you'll start to take pride in your work, and you'll develop a passion for a career that is starting to provide you value as much as you are providing value to the world. So in essence, developing a broad set of computer science skills is not exclusive to the passionate. You genuinely do like get things out of the comp arc and algorithms and all the breadth of core classes that we're required to take as CS majors. I could really go on and talk about how like the social science core classes also kind of help this, but that might be stretching it a little bit for the sake of this presentation. And becoming a good software engineer will naturally make you a great candidate for the internship, no matter what your motivation is. And I have an example here. Like, I make YouTube videos. I know a lot about the YouTube algorithm. I looked a lot into the YouTube algorithm while I was at Google this summer. And there are plenty of YouTubers who have 1 million subscribers who will tell you about how to optimize your YouTube video to get the most clicks and the most views and what keywords to put in your title. But in the end of the day, like, who gets good views? It's people that make good videos, people that tell good stories, because the algorithm is designed to promote good stories. So why try and hack the algorithm when you can just make good stories, tell good stories, make good videos, and in the process, get a bunch of views? In the same way, in software engineering, there's an entire industry of recruiters and HR personnel and interviews and interview tests that are all designed to find and hire good software engineers. So to think that you can just like take a bunch of shortcuts and find some good things to put on your resume, and then in the process like hack your way in there, it almost does a disservice to that whole industry that's like really trying to find good software engineers. So I don't have quite a cynical take on like leak code style interviews and things like that. I'm overall pretty optimistic that companies are trying to find good software engineers, not just leak code monkeys. And the research they've done is that good software engineers can also be good at leak code. So in the process, become a good software engineer, you'll probably improve at leak code in the process, and then you'll be able to get your jobs. So in terms of developing this craft that will in large part be represented on your resume, so at this point I am kind of talking about more career-oriented stuff. Building projects is the first thing. Following any kind of curiosity that you have, and following different sparks of curiosity, reading books about software engineering, immersing yourself in the culture. Like, just start watching talks on YouTube. I mean, if you like podcasts, there's tons of podcasts about software engineering. There's tons of books. There's tons of ways that you can just learn little tidbits of information about software engineering kind of culturally. And then whatever you do that is SWE related, be it a class or studying leak code, really try and apply yourself to that situation, and don't just kind of like, oh, I got to do this assignment, I got to type it out real quick while you're half tired and it's 1 o'clock in the morning and you just got back. Like, make sure that when you sit down to do something related to this career, like do it with intention, and through that you'll start to develop this idea of a craft. And kind of every path for becoming a good software engineer, that will be unique. The goal of becoming a good software engineer, that is common, but how we each do that will depend on our study habits and what we're interested in, and all these different factors that I really can't tell you how you like to learn or what you want to learn about. I would say that having a breadth of information is probably common amongst all of us, but everything else from there is totally different. And I really think you should try in class. Like, I'm not a fan of the C's get degrees mentality, because I think it kind of goes more towards the hacking mentality of things. We're all paying a lot of money to be here. I'm not saying you have to be at the edge of your seat in Menendez's computer architecture class. Like, you don't have to be super excited to show up to everything, but at least having some level of interest in what you're learning is definitely useful. And generally speaking, top performers in one part of CS or software engineering, like A students, they're also going to be top performers in other parts, and that will include getting interviews. It's not like by getting C's you free up so much time that all of a sudden now you can be a good interviewer. You'll always have to make tough decisions if you have an interview the next day and you have an exam the next day. That's going to happen. That'll be reflected in your GPA. Like, I'm not saying we all need to be 4.0 students here, but in general, just stepping away from the C's get degrees mentality. So yeah, time management, this is huge. This is huge for getting good at getting projects on your resume and getting good at interviewing. Developing a craft takes time. Slow and steady wins the race. And focusing on like deep work, when you sit down at your desk and you're going to do a leak code problem, which I'll talk about leak code and studying for interviews. Leak code is just a way to study for interviews. Really making sure that you absorb all the information, because you're dedicating time to this thing. Like, you want to make sure you get the most out of that time. And kind of putting the phone away is very useful. That, again, is a whole other presentation that I'm not qualified to talk about. And I spent a lot of time in high school trying to become as productive as possible. So I in a lot of ways, was very lucky there. If you have the privilege of controlling your schedule a lot, a more regimented like hour or so a day, or half an hour, depending on how busy you are, that consistency will be very useful. Pre-med students on YouTube, tons of great advice about how to be productive as a student. And it might be a brutal truth, but if you're like really struggling with 2 CS classes and a few core, and there's nothing crazy going on outside of your academic life, then chances are you have a productivity problem that you need to solve before you can really become like, or get a good software engineering internship or set your resume up. So that's just something to keep in mind. The first step, and I also mentioned on this slide, if you just have no day-to-day motivation, which if you're showing up to a CS club on a Friday night, then chances are you have some level of motivation for computer science. I do know my audience, but in general, if you have no motivation, like your mental health is a huge part of productivity and like developing any craft, whether it's software engineering or something else. And your first steps for developing a good resume might be going to see a therapist. I don't know. That's again all way above my pay grade, but it is something to keep in mind. And if your time is out of your control, there's a lot of advice online that you can also Google about just taking advantage of the little gaps, 20 or 30 minutes between classes, and trying to be productive with those. I think if you can't have that regimented half an hour a day or whatever because you have a hectic schedule, you can also fight to take advantage of the times in between all of your obligations. So closing thoughts here, kind of comparing the two mentalities. I think the hacking mentality is very like outside in, as opposed to the craft mentality, which is like starting at the bottom, first principles, what do we want? We want to be a good software engineer, and then we'll work out from there, get a good resume. I do think the hacking mentality leads to some level of imposter syndrome when you get somewhere and it's like, oh, I don't feel like I earned being here. If you like really develop a craft in software engineering, then when you get somewhere, you're going to be like, no, I'm here because I put in X amount of work and I learned these things and I like earned my spot here, as opposed to I like hacked my way in here. I'm being careful not to say I cheated my way in here, because I don't think that's a fair way to look at it, but more of a hacked your way in there. And then I do think the hacking mentality kind of leads you to live in the future, where it's like every time you sit down, you're not thinking about what you can do to become a better software engineer. You're thinking about what software engineering can provide you in the future. I don't think that's a mentality that leads to a lot of productivity. And like long term, you picture the grueling like New York City commute, an hour every day, the stereotypical like dad that hates his life because he commutes every day. That's somebody that resents his career, and that's something that I think we should all really actively try to avoid, going to corporate jobs where we'll be sitting at a desk for 8 hours a day, assuming we're not all remote in a few years. So yeah, the Craftsman mentality keeps in the presence, kind of inspires that passion in software engineering that I talked about. And I think once you get to the internship, I'm definitely getting ahead of myself here, but doing well in the internship, if you have that mentality, it's a lot easier, because you'll be able to genuinely have good software engineering conversations with your manager, with other interns, and you'll get to really contribute to that culture in the company that you're working for. And all of that they love that. They love when you're asking questions, or they would always love whenever I was at Google and I would say, oh yeah, like I read this distributed systems textbook or whatever, and I would start talking to them about that, just having that in, not passion, because I am trying to avoid the word passion, but having that craft in software engineering, super useful for once you actually do get the internship. And then in terms of getting started, finding any spark of curiosity. I don't care if you're into crypto or you want to start with the weather generator project that they're all working on back there. Like take weather generator and spin it into a full stack web app if you really enjoyed that project for some reason. There's places to start. And then eventually, as time goes on, you can go from just like curiosity, whatever you're interested in, to a more systematic, like, okay, I want to learn this topic from A to Z, so I'm going to start doing things on my own. Or I'm going to take CompArc, and I'm actually going to read the textbook because I'm interested in C. Or you take CompArc, and you're not into low level, but you are taking algorithms, so you actually read the textbook and kind of contribute there. Like, follow your curiosity, but do eventually come to a more systematic solution. And the analogy here is kind of like curiosity is the spark, but the discipline for developing that craft, that's what fans the flame. And yeah, developing the craft will be unique for everyone. And then to utilize it, once you have that craft, that mastery over some level of software engineering, like we're all in college here. None of us are about to be, 10 years of experience software engineers because for 6 months we listened to some random kid at a USACS event. But to utilize it, you can use it to accomplish any goal that you really want, no matter what the motivation, and you can definitely use it to get a software engineering internship. So enough of the philosophical crap. How to get a software engineering internship. It's dead simple. There's 2 steps. You've probably heard it said on YouTube. Get the interview, pass the interview. In terms of your, and the resume is like the portal to all these companies. And the most important thing for your resume is to put yourself in the recruiter's shoes. So your recruiter, before they see your resume, it's going to go through multiple layers, through a company, through an application tracking system. A robot's going to read and digest your resume first. And the only question that they want to answer is like, have you proven you can code? Has somebody mentored you in programming before? And preferably, have you proven you can code well? So things they care about, projects, experience, CS-related teaching roles or e-board positions, like anything that shows you're like really involved in CS. A bunch of things they don't care about that I see on resumes all the time. What classes you've taken, your high school GPA, your GPA if it's below a 3.0, and sorry, not just your high school GPA, just your high school in general, or anything you did in high school, unless you're like a freshman applying to STEP programs, because at that point, you haven't had enough college experience to really build up that repertoire. Half a page of non-software engineering related work, and just listing like skills, because when you just list skills, that's not proven at all. I could put that I'm a master at a million things on my resume, but if I don't have a project with a GitHub link or somebody that paid me in the form of a software engineering internship, to prove that I know those skills, then the recruiter is just going to pretend like it's not even on the page. There is some utility in a skills section because the robots that read your resume can easily digest lists. So at that point, if you do have it on your resume, just know that it's not for the recruiter. It's for the robot reading your resume. I don't think you should have fancy resumes with a bunch of colors or 2 columns or anything like that. There's room for all of that eventually down the line, but starting off to just get your foot in the door with these companies, it's pretty cold-hearted. They just want the facts. Can you code? And then we'll talk in a behavioral interview about your experience and about all these other things that you might have that you think are relevant that make you a good individual or a good employee. It's not stuff that makes you a good software engineer. So some leadership experience for behavioral interviews, because what they'll do in a behavioral interview, they scan your resume, they look for some experience you have where you led people, and they'll pull some random question out of a hat to ask you. And at that point, it's useful to have a couple of lines on your resume because that kind of leads the questions that they have in mind. That way, you're not completely in the dark. And in terms of fluff, everyone's going to need some fluff. If I look at your resume and I tell you that half the stuff shouldn't be on there, then you don't want to hand in a half-empty resume. You're going to put some fluff in there, but just be cognizant that it is fluff. Know that you should try and replace it with time. What did I just do? There you go. So projects. You don't know what projects to do? I'm going to tell you right now. Google the Pern Stack Guide, P-E-R-N. That's PostgreSQL, Express.js, React, and Node.js. If you build a full-stack web app with the Pern Stack, like that is it. If you just get like one thing and you go and you build that project over the course of a couple of days and you put it on your resume is automatically going to be a lot better because in the process of doing that, you're going to learn what a REST API is, how to work with a SQL database, how to write SQL queries, how a backend server works, how JavaScript works. Like, there's a lot that goes into that stack, but it's all learnable in the course of a couple of days. And I think that's a good bridge from kind of computer science into software engineering, developing systems and apps and things that would be firmly in the software engineering side of things and not necessarily taught in a computer science class. And you know, if you have a resume full of research, for example, like through the school in algorithms or machine learning, like that's all really cool. And you know, maybe a quantitative finance company would love that, but a more software engineering focused company like a General Motors or even like a Google or like a Facebook, they might not care as much about your research. So showing that you have some skill in software engineering, not CS, is useful, and the Pern Stack does that. The art of Googling things is key here. If you look up what is the Pern Stack, and then it tells you Postgres, Express, React, and Node, and you don't know what any of those are, Google each one of them. And if you don't know what SQL is when you look up what Postgres is, then Google what SQL is. And you just got to run like a depth first search on this stack and learn every node in the graph of information that is this project. And in the process, while you're Googling every definition that you don't understand, you're going to learn so much. Like, that's just you in the weeds exploring software engineering, becoming a better software engineer. If you're just trying to hack software engineering, you might follow a Tech with Tim guide for 2 hours about how to build the Pern stack, but then you're not going to learn anything, you're not going to come away with anything, but you will have that project on your resume, theoretically. So that's kind of the difference in mentality. On one hand, you actually walk away knowing some things about the stack, which will let you do so much more, as opposed to just following a tutorial for a couple hours. If you're taking CompArc, the machine learning quote-unquote project that we just did, I think sets up kind of a linear algebra library that could be useful for implementing an actual linear regression algorithm. If you don't know what any of that means, that's fine. Google all of it, or start with linear regression algorithm. Google that and start with the project that you built in CompArc. And then there are some classes like software methodology or computer systems that I don't want to say handholdy because that's not what it is, but they will definitely support you a lot in building resume-worthy projects. And class projects are resume-worthy projects. Don't think that just because you worked in it in a group or something like that it can't go on your resume. It totally can. So CS versus SWE, I already kind of talked about that. Object-oriented design, network. Projects shouldn't take much more than a weekend. It's okay if they do, though. If you wind up building some super huge project that takes 5 lines of your resume because you got carried away or because the scope of the project got larger, then that's great. I don't think there's any diminishing returns on your time in terms of each project. Chances are the bigger you build each project, you're still going to learn a lot if you build 5 medium projects or 5 small projects versus 1 super large project. You have so much to learn in software engineering as an early on CS student that it doesn't matter. You're learning stuff no matter what. You don't have to worry about repeating yourself in projects or anything like that. If it's 1 big project or 5 small ones, just build projects. That's the core of the lesson. And by the time that you start to question that advice is about the time that you'll know that you can start taking your craft into your own hands and questioning what I'm saying here. Applying to companies. Apply everywhere. If you come to me that you haven't had any companies reach back to you and I ask you how many companies you've applied to and you say 10, that is not enough. You are off by an order of magnitude. Apply to 100 plus companies. You can easily apply. If you sit down at your computer, you have your LinkedIn open in one tab, you have your resume pulled up in another, and you look up on Google software engineering internships 2023 GitHub or list or something along those lines. You'll find whole documented pages, community built, of lists of software engineering internships. Open 50 tabs or however much your RAM can hold and apply to every single one. It'll take you an hour. You'll apply to more companies than most people apply to over the course of their entire semester. So applying in bursts is super useful. We don't want you to get burnt out. If you're a freshman, there are programs like Google Step or Amazon Propel or a bunch of they're kind of like internships for internships, which which a lot of these companies also funnel those internships for internships directly into full SWE internships the next year. So great programs to apply to. Maybe not Facebook, though. I don't know how they're doing recently. And also, on the same kind of level with those internships, or internship for internships, is kind of like a local company or a Fortune 500 company, like a General Motors, or something that's not in tech, but you get software engineering internship on your resume. That is the goal. It doesn't matter what company it's at. It doesn't matter if you're paid or not paid. The goal is to have some company vouch for you, which nobody's actually going to call them. But theoretically, a company could vouch for you that you did something software engineering related, and that goes on your resume as software engineering intern. Whatever it takes to get those words on your resume, leave your ego at the door. If you don't get Google on your first try, that's fine. Not many people do, except for my friend Nihar, who was a STEP intern this last summer. He did it the first time. I did not. In terms of a couple of notes on applying, referrals are nice, but they're not game-changing by any means. They get you past the resume screening, but they don't. It's fine. They get you past the resume screening, but they don't actually help you in the interviews, or it doesn't help you get past that, unless you're at a super small company, in which case your dad works there and he can get you in. I'm talking about large tech companies at this point. The smaller the company, the more a referral might matter. And applying on the company website is generally a good place to start instead of like an Indeed or a Ripple Match or these like places where companies kind of put a posting. I would recommend applying directly on the company website, but that's not a game changer. Ripple Match, for example, I've applied to a lot of companies on there, and normally I just get an email like a week later telling me to apply on their actual website, and that's fine. It's one more step in the process, a long process that we should try and simplify as much as possible. But it is what it is. And don't waste your time on cover letters. If you wrote a cover letter for every application, that's how you write 10 applications over the course of an entire fall semester. So just don't waste your time there. It doesn't do anything. Set up your LinkedIn to look nice. We're talking about recruiters here. They are your first gateway into all of these companies. And recruiters really appreciate a good LinkedIn because a lot of them have good LinkedIns and they look for people on LinkedIn. So speak their language. Show that like you're playing the game with them. You're playing the corporate game. You know how to engage with them on a professional corporate level. And yeah, it might not be written in your evaluation for your interview, but all of that definitely helps. So set up a nice LinkedIn. It doesn't take very long, tons of YouTube videos. Personal website, blog, GitHub, YouTube channel, anything you have that adds dimension to your application is appreciated, mostly in behavioral interviews or by recruiters. Again, it's not going to get you past it's not going to turn a technical maybe into a yes, but it might be the difference between two yeses in terms of technical skills, but there's limited headcount, so they pick the person who did better on the behavioral. It's all about kind of marginal improvements to a certain point. Although as you increase the number of applications, the less the level of marginal improvements matters. Types of companies, we are approaching the end here. All right, I've been talking fast, but not for too long. That's cool. There are big companies, small companies, FANG, Big N, Big Tech, Manga, or whatever you want to call it. They have very standardized interview processes. They're pretty easy to study for with LeetCode.com. There's generally no system design questions. If you don't know what that means, I'm about to talk about it. Local companies / startups, they're a lot less hackable. They're going to throw you some curveballs that you might not be able to expect, that I might not be able to expect. And sometimes they have lower hiring bars, but because of those curveballs, it won't feel like it. Potential system design interviews there too, because a lot of the times smaller companies are looking for someone who can hit the ground running and actually write some code over the summer, which can be great if you get there and you actually write some code over the summer, but it can also be hard if you're like very CS oriented right now and you go to an interview expecting some level of software engineering skills. The small companies can trip you up. Last fall, I got into Amazon and Google. I didn't get into Capital One or General Motors. I just got a General Motors offer that I turned down last week for a full-time job. So apparently they like Google, but they didn't like me last fall. Their problem, not mine. Fortune 500 companies, really low algorithmic bar. Like I mentioned, General Motors seems to be a pretty cool company to work for, actually, all things considered, especially for the summer. One of the easiest interviews I've ever done. They definitely emphasize behavioral interviews. They definitely appreciate like a good LinkedIn, a lot of that more corporate business stuff. But note, software engineers there, it's not the glorified life that you see on like shows like Silicon Valley, where software engineers are like the cream of the crop in the company. Software engineers are tools for the business analysts to write code for their projects with. So it is very different culturally. You might be showing up in a suit every day, not a t-shirt and a bathing suit like I did while I was remote this last summer. Quant companies. I can't get into quant companies. I've tried. I know one person who is currently a student who got into a quant company, and I know a couple of people who graduated. All of them were associated with the competitive programming club in some way, so maybe that's a hint. But yeah, it's the highest algorithmic bar. They're going to ask hard system design interviews. They care a lot about university prestige, and I'm sorry, but Rutgers barely makes the cut sometimes, but it's definitely not like the easy in that some schools might have. And research is actually an advantage for quant because they do a lot of research trying to make as much money as possible, and that all ties in with research. They also really appreciate low-level stuff, C++. So if you get into quant, great. Let me know how you did it because I would really like to know. Side note, all of this is a vast oversimplification. I'm just trying to give you an overall understanding. So if you're like, oh, but this company does that, that's fine. I'm talking generally here. Preparing for interviews. Data structures are by far the most common interview that you're going to get asked. LeetCode.com is the website that I would do all of your preparation on. LeetCode will give you a problem. You will have to solve it. You'll hit run. The code won't work. rinse and repeat until you pass all their test cases. It's a lot like the LeetCode Easies are kind of like the problems that you solve in 112 recitations or on Algorithms 344 homeworks. So if you've taken both of those classes and done well, you might actually be pretty well prepared for LeetCode Easies. Mediums kind of combine concepts from LeetCode Easies in a way that might challenge your brain at first, and then LeetCode Hards are not something that you should really worry about. But they go one level above, and they might combine topics from multiple LeetCode mediums. So it is not a linear scale in difficulty. But if you can confidently solve mediums, you should be fine. And a lot of companies are going to ask you LeetCode Easies too. I'd say I got asked like a LeetCode Medium Light for Google, and I got asked a LeetCode Easy for Amazon last fall. And there's kind of a set of patterns. I think it's the next slide. So this is neetcode.io, which is the company that or the website that I would recommend you get to LeetCode through, because neetcode.io takes thousands of LeetCode problems and compiles a list of just like a 75 and 150. There's two lists, and all of them have solutions. All of them have code. And they are already organized into what kind of, like what bucket they fall into. So like arrays and pointing, or trees, or hash maps, or pointers, like all the classic data structures. It already does that organization. One thing to note here, it's really easy to hit that code Python solution there and just read it and say like, oh yeah, I understand this now. If you pay for LeetCode Premium, which is $25 a month, it is expensive, and there are ways to find the information for free if you're so inclined. It is very useful to actually read through and make sure you understand the solution and how you might expect yourself to come to that solution. So don't just read the code real quick. It's very worthwhile to spend the time to just stare at the problem until you really understand it. When I'm studying LeetCode, I don't actually solve that many problems. I look at a problem, I try and solve it for like 10 minutes in my head, and if I do, great. If I don't, then I look at the problem for another 10 or 15 minutes, but I look at the solution and I really try and understand that. I do think it's useful, especially in the beginning, to actually implement stuff, but to a certain level, the code just slows me down. I'm just trying to get the data structures and algorithms in my head. In terms of how to study, consistency is huge. I see a lot of people try and spend a whole week LeetCoding because they glorify the grind. That's not good. Do a problem or two a day. You will get burnt out if you try and do too many. They are hard problems, especially when you're just starting off. Don't waste any time. If you can't solve it in 20 minutes, look at the solution. There's no point in spending an hour trying to learn a data structure that someone won an award 20 years ago for coming up with the algorithm. Some LeetCode problems expect you to know some simpler algorithms that you might never be able to come up with on your own, but you should learn them, and they should be a part of your toolkit as a software engineer and CS student. Like I said, really absorb the solution and definitely revisit problems. If you don't get it the first time, come back to it a couple days later. You'll be amazed how many problems you don't remember the solution for, even though you just read it. So revisiting problems is useful. The application timeline, generally you're going to apply, you're going to get an online assessment, which is like a LeetCode problem, but no one's actually watching you do it. And then there's going to be an interview, which could be multiple rounds, and eventually, hopefully, you get an offer. And then in terms of interviews, it normally starts with like 5 to 10 minutes of introduction, occasionally a behavioral problem to start, or they'll ask you to talk about one of your projects, which is when that whole Craftsman mentality slides back in. And it's like, if you actually understand stuff, you can ace that part of the interview, and you can really make up for a lackluster algorithmic performance if you wowed them talking about your project. I've done that. I did it with Datadog a week and a half ago. I blanked on the algorithm, but they loved the projects I was talking about, and I had my final round for them on Tuesday. The solution, you're going to come up with it. Space-time complexity, super important for them. They want to know that you understand the solution. It's really easy. Well, easy. I don't know how easy it is, but it is possible to just memorize a bunch of LeetCode problems. That doesn't mean you understand it, and the interviewer will be asking you questions, trying to prove whether or not you actually understand the problem. And normally at the end, you do some analysis, overall thoughts of the interview. Behavioral interviews, the STAR, STAR formula is useful: situation, task, action, result. Look up the company values beforehand if you're so inclined, and then name drop them. Recruiters and people that get behavioral interviews really eat that stuff up. A lot of the times the behavioral interviews won't necessarily be with a software engineer, so that's when you can really woo them with some business knowledge or showing that you understand their domain as much as you understand software engineering. Example. Oh yeah, just Google example behavioral interview questions and prep some answers for them, not to be expected to answer them, but just so that you kind of gain an intuition for the STAR method and what questions might be asked. System design, you're unlikely to get asked system design questions. Don't study for them unless you get to a company that tells you they will. I know Datadog does, and I know a lot of quant companies do. Like I said, if you get into a quant company, let me know how you did it. And if you get into Datadog, then they give you an example problem and they tell you you're going to have it. So you shouldn't be blindsided by a system design interview unless it's a super small company, in which case I already warned you about the curveballs they can throw. Mid to late career, though, system design super important. So it's only for a new grad that you don't have to really worry about it. In terms of utilizing Rutgers, USACs, plenty of great events. Take challenging electives. I take challenging electives. I can't say that enough. It is really worth it to not just Google the easiest CS electives, because an ML principles or a software methodology, those classes pay off. Find a group of students to study together. The Cave seems to have plenty of that. And competitive programming club is great for solving problems for the sake of enjoying it, but do not go if you're just I want to get good at LeetCode. They embody the whole Craftsman mentality there. I really do appreciate that club. But so if you want to take that mentality with things and just learn how to solve problems, then that's a great club to go to. And that's everything I got. So if you want me to review your resume, let me know. If you're happy with me putting your resume on blast, then that would be great so I can show some examples. If not, that's okay. My information is up here. You can message me or pull me aside afterwards. Thank you, everyone, for coming. I hope I didn't talk too fast. That's all I got.